Hello, everybody. Good evening. So good to see so many of you in the house. I hope you've had a chance to see the exhibition, if not, maybe later. Good evening, everyone. My name is Loh Ki Hong. I'm the creative director here at Factory International. I've also curated the button-up exhibition in deep collaboration with Ai Weiwei. Tonight, we're going to spend some time to talk and reflect about making this exhibition. It's been a 4-year process, but it's been such an exhilarating journey for both of us. We hope tonight to share with you some of the insights, some of the secrets, some of the arguments and tensions, but most importantly, also to celebrate the fact that here in Manchester and here at Aviva Studios and Home of Factory International, we're so lucky and honored to be able to do this incredible show with this man. So without further ado, please help me welcome Ai Weiwei. I hope all of you are in good spirits. Ai Weiwei, how are you feeling? 你觉得怎么样现在?
I took a nap before I come here. It's very nice experience.
Good. I have to say it's been quite a long week for the two of us, preparing for the opening, and we had an incredible opening last night with so many friends, family, colleagues, people that we all love to come and see the show button up. So maybe, Weiwei, let's start with going back 4 years ago. Yeah, let's go back in time 4 years ago, when we first invited you to Manchester to come and see this venue. This was in around July 2022. And of course, the building was still under construction. And of course, we had to put on our personal protection equipment, hard hats and all to walk around the space that was still being completed. I want to ask you, Weiwei, what was your first impression when you first came to this building?
My first impression when you asked me to put on these shoes, this kind of very strange shoes. It's almost like a metal type of shoes and a helmet. I feel a little bit strange because I'm a constructor. I did many architecture projects. Yes, it's good if you protect yourself, but here it's very clear. You have to do that, otherwise you cannot get into it. We're living in a world, sometimes it's very much overprotected, but at the same time, dangerous is everywhere. The shoes and the helmet cannot even cannot really help you. So I feel a bit strange. But when I see the building, I immediately realize this is a state-of-the-art type of facility. I've been doing exhibitions over hundreds individual exhibitions, never had a single place compared to the facility like this one. So it's very attractive. And so I was seduced by what I have seen.
I like that, and I would take that. In this moment of seduction, because I also said to you, maybe let's not do a retrospective or let's not do a survey show, but to think about this space and to think about maybe making new work, maybe putting together with old work, and to explore the different possibilities. And because I remember after that visit, after you came to see the construction of the building, your gallerist in London called me and said, "What have you done to Ai Weiwei?" Because maybe you don't remember this, huh? You kept thinking and you were super excited about things, right? Because they said they've never seen him like this. So I wanted to ask, what was the beginning of thinking about the heart of this exhibition, the start of this exhibition?
It's always a challenge when you have to ask yourself why I have to do another show. And why in Manchester? So it's never easy, so I have to gradually getting familiar with the history and with my personal experience or relations in terms of how to set up a show which have a clear narrative. It's not just moving some works to a new location. So first you have to spend some time to convince yourself it's worth the effort. And yes, I did some study about Industrial Revolution, which is very exciting words. And I realized Manchester have its own glory and its own proud in the history. And and somehow one how to say businessman's sentence I still remember. It says if every Chinese make their shirt 1 inch longer or make Manchester proper for years, something like that. I really feel that's interesting. Why a Manchester merchant would think that way. So, of course, I would think also about Britain's relation to China. It's not just the past, it's also related to globalization and today's China's political, economic reason and conditions. And there's so much related to my family and related to my personal growth or my personal experience. So I'm eager to do something in relating to that aspect because I never did a show can really wrap up personal relations to the whole history of the past 200 years. Yeah. And one incident is the button, so.
Yeah, and in a way, this kind of became the window, right? Because after the visit, we did a bit of exchange, and then you talked about, Manchester and being excited by the history. For me, I'm a not so new arrival anymore in Manchester. It's been 4.5 years. I would say I'm a proud Mancunian, even though I don't sound like one, because there is something about this city and of course this part of England that has witnessed many first things. And I think quite central to the both of us, this Industrial Revolution was such a powerful moment in our history that really connected to the world right up to this day. Yeah, the invention of the looms, the kind of mass production, all of that shifted everything. From the times of, the Victorian times of coal mining, and power, steam engines, and all of that. It's such a particular moment, but also quite extreme moment in global history. And I remember after these exchanges, Weiwei asked me to meet him in Cambridge in December 2022. Maybe you forgot that as well. But because, of course, Weiwei has been also spending some time in England, living in Cambridge, because his son Ai Weiwei, who just arrived this evening, I'm very happy that he made it here, was studying in Cambridge. And so, in a way, we met in Cambridge, and Weiwei shared with me this story that I think most of you know, because with the papers have published this a lot. It's about the buttons, about how you came into the possession of the buttons. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Well, I think in the history, even personal history, many things happened unexpected. It's almost like a coincidence. I think by 2019, right? I'm a person always spending a lot of time on social media. I get very bored, and I see someone put a note there to say they have a buttons for it's going to be Landford. It's a company bankrupt with those merchants. So I just casually said, "Oh, don't do that. Maybe I can have that." Those buttons. So I grew up in very, very extreme poor conditions. So once you lose a button, when I was young, like 10 years old, then you couldn't find another button to replace it. So then, so we see buttons are very precious, because we don't even have an industry to make those buttons. We don't even have an industry to make matches. If you want to light up a secret, you go to neighbor's cooking, stove to really borrow some fire. Otherwise, it's very poor, extremely poor. So when I heard this about 30 tons of buttons, that is a kind of crazy image in my mind. So after some negotiation, we get all those buttons. Then take us 2 years to figure out what we have. We realize we have about 9,000 different types of buttons. I thought the buttons, maybe there's 50 different types, but 9,000 different types. And each of them have a name, and those names also relate to culture or, very strange names. So it got me quite excited, but really worried, because what am I going to do with those buttons? And the people say, "Oh, you're very well known of doing large installation, and such as I did in Tate Modern with sampler seeds." But I think, no, I cannot do buttons if it doesn't relate to the meaning or purpose of what a button is. A button for me has to attach to a piece of fabric, then become a button. Otherwise, it doesn't, it loses the meaning, because the Wittgenstein once said the meaning is the function, or function is the meaning. So till I studied the Manchester's fabric production, that first industrial revolution. Sometimes it can be called a cotton revolution, right? It's fast. First, I think globalization. You got all the materials from India, from the United States, relate to early colonial time, and also relate to slavery. And then after that, and it also so much relate to trading, because China is selling porcelains, tea, silk, but they don't buy anything, All the sobers just went to China. So in that kind of case, I realize the 3 times British has landed this food in China, and that later forced China become extremely political society and become a part of a Soviet bloc. So that definition is really a fact to my life because my father joined the communist in the earlier time, established a new nation, then later become a political prisoner and being exiled. And the year he was exiled, I was born. So actually, I spent my early years till I was like 19 years old in the exile. And so that clearly gave a definition about China, about me, about the East, West, or even current conditions. So the Button story started like that.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Because in a way, when we were building the exhibition, it became more and more clear, your practice, I mean, of course, people, would say that you're an incredible artist, which I agree. You're also an activist. You're a keen observer of humanity, or the shifts about humanity. But for me, what was striking was in building this show, he does this again all the time, in building this show, that parallel relationship between your family life, your personal life, and your practice as an artist, with the politics, with the activism, with the art, was quite important together. And that was particularly striking for me because I've seen so much of your work, and for me, this was something quite special, that gave me the encouragement that the show that we will build together would be anchored in very, very strong emotion. And, at this time, I just want to acknowledge Wang Fen because, and Wang Fen is Ai Lao's mother and Weiwei's partner, and thank you for being here because when I spoke with her before, she says as their son, is growing up and studying, they tend not to go to exhibition openings anymore because it's just, another exhibition opening, right? But she said to me, maybe this is time again to come and accompany Weiwei for the opening of the show. So that really, really touched my heart. I just want to say thank you for being here. And the reason why I want to introduce Wang Fen right now. Let's go back to December 2022. When you first talked about the connection between Industrial Revolution, of course, colonial times, the Button story of how you possess Button, the show, maybe some of you have seen it, it's really quite an epic conversation between the past and the present. I want to ask you, Weiwei, when you were thinking about the different pieces that potentially could be in this show, what were some of your, thinking of why Wang Jiaqi, which is the Wang family hall, and then why the bombs? I'm just going to take the two extreme ends first.
Well, it's very hard to give a clear explanation of artworks because that should belong to art critics. And nowadays, we don't see any good art critics anymore. So I feel sorry for them. But to really give, I think artists, the best thing about artists, they don't have to use words. Words has very limited way of expression. That's why art still exists, because it's about emotion, and it's about you use a form or language which carries something words cannot describe. It's about a memory. It's about what we are scared of, or what is intimidating, or what is bigger than our understanding. Yeah, there's so many things are bigger than our understanding today. And so normally we would say the art experience is overwhelming. And also it can be part of a philosophy and always relate to moral judgment. So aesthetic judgment are very often being re-identified by the new conditions. So then we always have to find some source we can really relate ourselves where we are really come from. So Wang Jia's, Wang's family, how it's made by a tradition which is completely structured by wooden, the joints. It doesn't need any metal piece. And it's like a puzzle together. So that understanding comes from a long time knowledge of Chinese culture to understand the material or the construction method in relating to nature. Now today we don't talk that much about nature anymore, because the Industrial Revolution basically is against the nature. It's we find a man-made nature which is much more efficient and can benefit and can be profited. But still, that is the argument. How much we can still, how much we would lose our relationship to the environment and the nature. And we can, our human life is still pretty short. But still, we are questioning. So that kind of philosophy about how humans relate to nature is disappearing very dramatically. On the other end of the how, we have a history of bombs, which is about this kind of military destruction material for past 100 years, where the first bomb being made. And, the high peak was when US dropped these 2 nuclear bombs to this Japan's land, which still is argument, is that necessary? Or, but today we still have wars. It's not just one location, it's many, many locations. And killing, massive killing, and impossibly to even to understand by any kind of moral judgment, why those children has to die, why those women has to die, why the medical workers or journalists has to die. But this happens daily in front of us and it challenges us. So I think maybe easiest way to, as an artist, you just do a little research about who made those bombs and how powerful. Those bombs, I think it's the life size of the real bombs. The big bomb is 9 meters high. So when we use Lego structure it, Lego is a very simple language. I love Lego because Lego is just, you cannot be simpler than Lego. It's only 40 colors. We structure the bomb. We also structured the Napoleon. So it doesn't really seem only 40 colors in there. The bomb image only take 4 colors, black, white, and 2 types of gray. But it's so rich when you look at it. And that's completely, I would say, modern language, pixels, and all those pixels, and it's almost like a definition of today, and could be near future. We still use that once computers still existing. Yeah. So that pulled a part of earlier moral and memory to the uncertainty of the destruction and also our contemporary culture. Yeah. So in between, of course, there's a lot of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, just so you know, the history of bongs, of course, was shown before, but not in this format. It was in a vinyl print, and never ever flat where you see the full piece of work. It's only been shown in museums and galleries that you have to bend around walls because it's so large. It's 24 by 9 meters by 9.7 meters. In the War Memorial Museum in London, it was on the floor, on the sides there's a staircase, and this is the first time actually you can see the full spectrum of
that's a character of me. I always take advantage of them to maximize the possibility and without consider the consequence, where I'm going to storage this piece after this Manchester. Once I meet a monster, I'm dealing with a monster, and so this will be my last chance, and this is my first chance. So I enjoy this kind of one night love story, and so far I think it's worth it.
Right. This one night stand is worth it.
Yeah, one night stand.
I mean, in a way, it's so powerful to also see the echo, on the 2 ends of the exhibition, where you have the Lego bricks that are also pieced together, just by themselves.
And a lot of locals.
Yes, exactly. So also, just so you know, maybe some of you are here tonight. In the making of this work, it's also the first time that Ai Weiwei has opened up the process of the making to the people of the city that the work will be shown. And so last September, we took out 2 panels of the history of bombs. And we did a factory line in the warehouse where we invited students, other volunteers to come and piece the work together. And in a way, this invitation was quite a special thing, I feel, because Ai Weiwei said, what if we find a way to have a very direct connection in the making and the exhibition and the showing?
Actually, I try to encourage people. I think it's an important lesson to say everybody can be an artist and everybody is an artist. But very often the school education made people, become scared, or to say we have to learn to become an artist. You don't have to learn if you know how to play Lego. And everybody can be as good as those very well-known artists, such as me. It's just it's so simple. But of course, you still have to buy Lego. Lego is very expensive, and therefore not only expensive. Once Lego even said they don't sell to me, so we were very surprised. The explanation they said, we don't use Lego for political peace. That really made me a little bit feel even more strange. I thought Lego just like any brick company. You can use bricks to build castles. Also, you can build shelters. You don't identify a material as a political material. So then I have to, for this piece, we have to ask a Chinese company, which is, I will not say the name, but, same, produce 40 colors identical to the Danish Lego. And the price would be less than 1/10. My God, this is another story about China. And they can produce as many as you want. They can deliver to you tomorrow. If you call them before midnight, maybe. They don't have a vacation or sick. How do you call when you say you're sick, you don't work anymore?
That you are sick, you're absent from work.
Well, not exactly sick very often.
Oh, you pretend you're sick.
Yeah, in German just had a law about you have to really have a proof for you're sick.
Okay. A medical certificate.
But we're dealing a lot of people, I think they're mostly mentally lazy. They call it sick. So, but China, they have another kind of sickness. If they don't work, they feel sick. So, of course, we got a lot of Chinese Legos, and we can do whatever we like that make me sick. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's go back to the Wang family hall, because it's interesting, right, that you talked about China now. This nugget of anecdote about the speed at which things can be produced, sent to you, and all of that efficiency, I would say. And you look at the Wang Hall, it's such a precious piece of architecture that really encapsulates, thousands of years of, I think, culture and history in just one structure. I remember when we were installing the hall, and of course, it's been sitting in your Portugal studio for a while. I remember seeing it quite some time ago, and then to see the wood again. It was very emotional because I saw the wood darken, I saw the wood, wet, and then dry again, and so I saw a lot of new cracks. And in a way, it's almost like the human body, right?
Life, it's like life.
When the human body, when you fall, when you cut yourself or whatever, the scar, it kind of remains quite a bit.
Show me your scar.
It's all on my legs. So in a way, I want to ask you, because the hall, for me, amongst all your works, I feel this is the one work that is the most organic. I say this because actually, if you see the work, there are many things in it. There are many parts that are different colors, additions, changes, and all of that. You want to talk a bit about?
I think, yes, it's quite organic, but not the most organic, because I'm most organic.
Of course, yes. Yes, you are the most organic.
But you're true, if you look at, I'm very interested in those life after death, like a piece of root, or, a dead tree or a trunk. I try to think what was like, who was living those kind of houses, why they have to build houses like this, and what kind of dreams they would have. So that takes hundreds generations to develop some kind of perfect form, so they can really feel they live in that house with the maximized satisfaction. It's not just about the comfort. Very often, a piece of furniture or house is not just about comfort. Not like modern days. You just always, the comfort is number one or the material life. But at the old time, it's about ritual. It's about we're human being. We're dignified. We're identified with some kind of moral standard. So there's three words in that house. It just happened. First words is about a ritual and harmony, which is also very important, right? We have to be harmoniously stay together, no matter how different we are. We have to recognize the difference, and we have to accept, but also we have to think we're fortunate to be different. So, but not today's world. We're trying to destroy the difference. So, especially with technology or AI, will make the people much less different. So that is a real threat to humanity.
Yeah.
That's what if I simply put it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think we live in a world now that's all about black and white. It's for or against. There is no space for nuance, no space for deep listening, no space for conversation. And in many ways, when we were kind of thinking about the hall, of course, like you say, it was somebody's house at one point. And a house, of course, is not just shelter, it's gathering, it's home, it's being together, right? So in a way, it was also quite powerful when you decided to also put the tea house work right in the middle of the hall. Just so you know, in the original hall, this is only the front room of the house. Yeah, so like the front room when you enter, there is a big chunk on the left, a big chunk on the right, and two more chunks at the back surrounding a big ass courtyard.
Okay.
So when you look at it, it's a Ming Dynasty hall. You think, okay, this is a big house. It's only 1/5 of what was built, and you can imagine the kind of scale of what it is. But I want to return to something that is quite particular. And as a Chinese person, it's quite important for me because it locates, of course, identity, but it also locates, I think, sense of place. So for those who have seen it, if you have not, sorry, maybe go back and see it. But at the front of the house, right at the top, there is like a signboard, yeah? And in any house in China, there will be a kind of almost like a nameplate, if you will, to announce, what is this hall or house and who does it belong to. And in Chinese, the three characters says Li He Tang, that you read from left to right. And I'm going to literally translate it into English. Essentially, it says propriety or decorum, good manners, peace, and whole. For me, it was such a powerful kind of thing when we're installing the work that suddenly I did not clock this, but I realized it is speaking directly to the bombs, to the history of bombs. You want to talk a bit about that?
I'm not so good in talking about that. Just you can do that. It won't make a talk very long.
Yeah. No, but we still have time. So don't worry. Yeah, because I think in a way, this exhibition, usually you have, a number of works, right? But I think what was interesting for me in the journey of making this exhibition with you, maybe subconsciously and sometimes quite consciously, we started to think about the conversation between the different works and how it starts to kind of join up together. And with this, there's another kind of small bit I want to draw attention to, which is right at the far corner of the hall. You also see different blocks holding up the beams, and this changes over time because some bits either lost, disappeared, or broken. But right at the corner, it's like a glass crystal kind of block. And underneath, maybe you noticed it, maybe you didn't. If you didn't, you can go back again to see it. But there was a piece of paper with a writing of 4 Chinese characters, 心平而好, which again literally translates to, if your heart is calm, all will be well. And this was written by Ai Weiwei, no?
Yeah, it was written by Ai Weiwei, which is my son when he was about 4 or 5 years old. And we mix a piece to support this pillar. So once I needed to do something, I think I have to do something very special. I made a crystal base, and but I still feel something's missing there. So that time I was still under this kind of interrogation and soft detention. So I now write this sentence to me because he is a young boy. He's very sensitive. He deeply worried about my condition, but he would not say that. He says, if your heart is at peace, everything will be no matter. It's no problem. I was deeply touched by his philosophy because he made up these 4 words. And so he senses I'm probably the problem within myself. And I never really, consolidate with myself until today. And that's why I attract so much trouble. And I'm still a very troublesome person. If you don't understand that, you can ask Wang Fen. She can tell you, maybe, how troublesome I was and I am today. So that's a character. Chinese used to say, 江山易改，本性难移. That says you can change the mountains and rivers, but it's very hard to change a person's character or personality. 本性 is character and personality, which I realize not about others, but rather about me. Why I still doing so-called art or doing exhibitions, and it must be my character. There's many other things I can do, and why I still have to sit on stage and to have those light right on me. I couldn't even see you very well because you're on the dark side. So, and that's some kind of tragic of life. You want to continue?
We can if you want.
Yeah. So my son is he has something beyond the intelligence because he was too young, and how he could come out words like that. So you can see, okay, the kind of intelligence does not really come from education. After Cambridge's education, I think he got dumb because he become a more believer in rationality. He would make argument about logic. I think that's a trap. Why we have to live in this kind of world? Like Einstein said, the most incomprehensible thing is everything can be comprehensible.
Yeah.
I think Einstein is also being trapped somehow.
Yeah.
But he plays violin, I heard about it, but
yeah.
must be another good player. So anyhow, I learned so much from those young people. And are you going to say something?
Yeah. No, I'm going to continue the conversation in a similar direction of travel, because of course you talked about, and when I first heard this story about Ai Weiwei writing these forwards, I was deeply impressed. So I was actually a bit shocked, because there is something about how, again, the family and the exhibition and all of that start to kind of land. and really also at that time, because as you shared many stories with me. You shared many things, and it got me to think about, how can we and how is it possible to capture.
You sound like we were in love.
I don't know about that, but but because there is so much.
You're so scared.
Because there is so much juicy things that I feel we want to capture in this exhibition, right? And so I remember there was one particular story, obviously, that connects also, eventually we landed on the title Button Up, which is the idea of the button, or which is the central work in this entire exhibition around the buttons. Because you shared with me the moment that when you were secretly arrested and detained for 81 days. You said there was one moment that when you were in the detention cell, the button of your pants came off, right? And that, and the soldiers were asking, or the guards were asking you, what do you need? And you said, can I have something, needle and thread, to sew the button again? And because at that time you lost a lot of weight, and you have to move around, and you were holding up your pants to move around. And I was very struck by this image. And initially, I thought maybe we should make a work that captures, this moment that would connect the entire exhibition. And those of you who have seen Weiwei's previous work, that there was this piece called Sacred. That's 6 iron boxes of dioramas that captured moments of his time when he was detained. But none of it talked about this, and I proposed initially, what if we make a 7th box? Maybe, could be an interesting, anchor somehow in this show to do that. And then you said something very curious to me, which I was also quite taken aback. You said, what if it was a performance? And for a moment I was like, what do you mean? Do you want to make a theater show? Or what is it? What came to your mind when you suggested
Well,
that?
I think I understand you're a person who you're very much into performance world, and I just trying to speak your own language. I don't do performance that much, but or my life is performance. I can just have a fragment of something to relate to this beautiful facility. I will feel sorry if I don't use this space. So yeah, that's basically the idea. But still, to sewing up a button, which can be so meaningful, because a pants without button, it doesn't really work or works that well, because that's the only time when I have to hold my pants to walk with these 2 military soldiers. Each day we would walk like maybe a few hours. And it's a small space, back and forth. And I lose 10 kilos. That's when I was getting to this detention. They said, Weiwei, it's very funny. People come here, they will lose weight. I think, wow. And it's true. They always very honestly tell me what will be the result. I lose 10 kilos. So my pants is very loose, and I lose the only button. And I hold my pants to walk, which is not very easy, because you lost a little bit balance. And once my pants dropped, I see those 2 soldiers laughed. That's the only time I see big smile in these 2 soldiers, such a natural smile. They never see a detainer dropped its pants right in front of them.
Yeah.
So I did it purposely, because it was extremely severe situation. So I think I have to do it in here once more.
Yeah, great. So, which brings me to what's behind us. Yeah, so this is the reconstruction 1-to-1 ratio of the detention cell that Weiwei was that lived in for 81 days, some 15 years ago. So, as part of this exhibition, we decided to make a 24-hour performance, live performance in front of a live audience, but it will also be live streamed globally. And in a way, we will compress 24 hours, the 81 days into 24 hours. So in a way, over that 24 hours, if you have got a ticket and you've come or, you want to come, we're still trying to make new 24-hour tickets if you're interested to spend 24 hours with Weiwei.
24 hours is not so interesting, but one moment I have to be a nudity. I have to take a shower, and I have to sit on toilet, and I will not have this expensive leather jacket. You'll see my own skin when I was born. So that is kind of precious. So, yeah, bring your camera and iPhone and.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you what time that will happen? Maybe not. But it was actually, I was quite taken and I was very touched actually when you suggested, kind of a performance. But as you say, a lot of your life, whether, putting, after the arrest to just irritate the authorities, right? Because, you were broadcasting the surveillance 24 hours a day for months on end. And then they couldn't take it anymore and they told you CCTVs, right? Because in a way, I've also really, really love and appreciate your cheekiness, your sense of humor and how you like to stir the pot a bit.
I understand you like to say nudities, and when I was in your age, I do too, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so recently Weiwei actually
I'm too old for that, but it will be last my presentation of my body, so.
Yeah, but great. So, and in a sense, I think what this performance will do also is start to reveal, I think, a lot of things that were not documented anywhere. And for me, as a curator, this is exactly why I want to make projects with artists, to kind of think about opening up spaces by which things that are buried, things that are hidden, things that are forgotten. And for me, you're also, I would say, slight obsession about collecting. It's also, for me, actually something far deeper than, even for your art practice, I feel. There is something about you wanting to collect, like the buttons. And if people who don't know, Weiwei is quite an expert in antiquities, in collecting antiques, and was influenced by your younger brother. I want to ask you about why this thing about collecting, like the Wang Hall, all these things that you feel compelled to want to do something about it.
I think all those man-made materials carries a lot of reasoning, argument, and also tells us what has been lost. And it's evidence of our strong logic and passions, and sometimes it's so unbelievable. And of course, it's very attractive to me. That's why I do collect. But of course, you have a short life, and whatever you collect, include you, will disappear, right? So, which is just like insects, and we always wondering why a spider would make its own net. why the net can be so beautiful. And does better know the words of beauty? I don't know. I still feel many things we do, we not really exactly know what we're doing, but we keep doing it.
And I think this kind of philosophy, this kind of ethos is also, for me, is something that I've learned from you. That in a way,
Don't learn from me. It's very dangerous.
maybe I like being dangerous also.
Huh. We always hear that.
Yeah, maybe not. But in a way, what's important is that, in life, in everything that you do, it is actually very important to hold on to not knowing everything. One, because it's very boring. If you know everything, it's very boring, right? But second, I think for me, what's more precious is that you kind of, it's about chance. It's about sudden discovery of something. And there's one also anecdote I want to share and with everybody, is that when Weiwei and I were here last week installing the exhibition, and they were blowing up all the black figures of the Law of the Journey, the boat, the figures, right? And then to test whether anything leaks or not while they were building the boat. And of course, the team, Weiwei's team and our technicians, they piled up the bodies, in the space. And then you and I looked at it, it's like, wow, this is such a powerful image. And actually, yesterday, there was still a pile of bodies underneath the chandelier, underneath the Murano glass piece. But this morning, you called me and said, maybe we should remove them.
Yes, I have a problem. If I don't see things proper, I will lose my sleep. This is, I don't know, many people have that kind of problems. And actually, my partner Finn has a stronger problem with that, because she always experiences how me, as a person, are so improper. So that make her always losing sleep. So I called you. I said maybe we should move it. So that gave each individual work a clear identity. It's like a human being. If we too much relate to each other, then we lost some kind of identity. That's a problem with love. And basically, love is about giving some identity away. And so yeah.
I want that on a T-shirt. Yeah.
Anyhow, this morning I come, it looks much better. The chandelier looks better, the background of the bombs looks better. And, people will not notice if you don't do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you as well, because this has been also quite an example of the process between us, that it's a lot of, back and forth, changing things right up to the last minute, tweaking it. And it's something that for me is also a gift, in how we can work with artists, because, that kind of constant, thinking, observation, and reflecting, it's really, really special, I feel. The last thing I want to ask you, because you talked about love, right? And I feel that of late, it feels like it's quite present, around you. Because if you go to Weiwei's Instagram, you'll notice that in the last maybe couple of months, there's a lot of
2 months, not a couple.
Okay, 2 months.
Exactly 2 months.
Yeah, in the last 2 months, you will notice, how I'm also examining Weiwei's social media. You will notice that, he would post stuff about, of course, the project, the artwork, observations, but there's also a lot of images of Wang Fen, Ai Lau when he was young and all of that. Where are you now in terms of what you're thinking?
I'm basically a very confused human being, and I enjoyed the kind of mood. I was confused, and confused in both ways. Either you're keep losing what you should care, and also you keep getting what you don't the location you don't belongs to, or whatever is a sense you should not even have need. So make this short. That 2 months experience make me understand how much love waited. So I needed to publish a paper. Maybe I can win the Nobel Prize for next year, because I know exactly how love weighted is 10 kilo. So what you see me today or tomorrow is exactly 10 kilos less. And that's exactly the same weight I lost during the detention 15 years ago. So I'm 20 kilos less. But once I lost 10 kilos because I do feel I've been kidnapped by state. And I guess mentally I burned out all the weight. And this time I do feel I'm kidnapped by love, and I don't want to sleep. I lost a lot of sleep, and I eat just once a day, and I almost lost taste of trying to eat. So it's not bad experience. It's just to make you feel much lighter. Actually, it's lighter because I weigh myself, and each day I feel, oh my God, 1 pound less. Just another day. So, yeah, I think maybe after this, I can open how do you call this, lost weight center. I can guarantee anybody to lose weight in 2 months at about 10 kilo. But I was kind of still hesitating how much I would charge people want to get into the program, how much 10 kilos would worth. And I still not decided yet.
Okay, good.
But I guarantee you lost 10 kilos.
Yeah. I kind of like that, after this exhibition, you're thinking about opening a new business, about, losing weight, and actually in the last couple of days.
I think you can be first one to test it.
Yes, I agree, because also Weiwei in the last couple of days says you're getting a bit fat. And, But Weiwei, I just really want to also take this moment to express my extreme appreciation and thanks for your trust, your generosity, your friendship, and your gift actually to honor us with this exhibition. And I've been hearing, people that have coming into the space. That is such a powerful moment, especially in the times that we live right now. The world has gone to shit. I will say it again. I cannot stop saying it. But for me, making this exhibition with you has also given me a lot of hope to know that actually there is still a possibility, as human beings, as humanity, that we can, not saying change the world, but we can think slightly differently, to find a new language. So I want to wish you, Weiwei, after this, when you open the new slimming business, I want to challenge us again to find a new language for the next 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank Ai Weiwei.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you will join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Maybe stay all the way to Saturday 5 p.m. if you can power through. I will power through it as well. But thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for coming to the exhibition. Please tell your friends, everybody to come. This is a moment, it's a once-in-a-lifetime moment that we get to see something so special here in Manchester. Thank you so much, everybody, and good night. Thank her. She's incredible. Thank you. Thank you, my dear.